Yay! Today I want to help get you organized. We're gonna briefly touch on 3 different areas that you can get organized in. First, your files, second, your time, and third, your everything else. And third is gonna be your ideas. If you're just getting started using video in your marketing, now is a perfect time to get started with a file strategy. That is a standard way of organizing your files into folders and your naming structures. If you can figure out a naming convention that works for you early on, you're going to save so much time in the long run. Believe me, it's not a fun process when you wait. Some considerations that you might want to figure into how you should organize your files are to keep in mind the date that you shot the footage, the actual project or the client, also numbering the clips in order of when they were taken. Especially when you start to get into more complex things with multiple cameras, multiple memory cards, you really need to keep track and keep organized in all of that. Keep organized, stay organized. And then you have other considerations when you start talking about editing and having multiple versions of things. Because it's really important to keep track of that too, so you're not sending the wrong versions to your social media coordinator or the wrong versions to your clients. My recommendation there would be, no matter how sure you are, never name something final. And if you've ever done any creative work before, you probably realize how quickly that gets out of hand when a client comes back with more edits after you had a final version, and now you have final underscore final underscore final underscore this really is the final underscore final. I hear a lot of newer freelance videographers talk about how long they keep their files on their hard drive for. A lot of people will say they'll keep them for a year. A lot of people say they'll keep them for 2 years. But really, in the grand scheme of things, hard drive space or cloud storage is so cheap. There's no reason that you should ever actually get rid of every single copy of your video files. I even commit to my video clients that I'm never gonna get rid of their footage. I'm always gonna have it in case it needs to be revisited or they need that footage again in the future. But my process for actually backing up footage is a little bit more complicated. And you only have to lose footage or have a hard drive go down on you one time for you to learn your lesson and to be more careful with your data. So as soon as I get done shooting, I like to offload my cards right away. And I've learned to not wait until the next morning or wait until I change locations even. I like to offload that footage when I'm on location before I even leave, while everything is still fresh in my mind. And then I set those cards aside and I don't touch them, I don't format them, I don't write over them until after that project that I had just shot that's still on those cards is edited and delivered to the client. And then on top of that, I like to keep a third copy of all of those files on a separate hard drive that is in a different location than my main computer and the cards. You might think that I'm a little bit paranoid with that third part, but I've had that actually save me in the past when a hard drive has gone down. I still had a copy on a different hard drive in a completely different location. You never know with this stuff, and storage is so cheap that it's so much easier to just make sure that you're not gonna have a problem in the long run, because you don't wanna have to go back to a client and say you need to reshoot because you lost footage. Another thing that I learned was to get one of these, a label maker. And I label everything. I label my batteries, I label my cards, I label my hard drives. That way, if any of them have a problem, I can make sure to set that one aside and not try to rely on it. I'm not taking a card that might have gone bad, it might have corrupted itself. I'm not taking that out on a shoot and relying on it. But it's also helpful to know which cards you used on which project and to make sure that you don't overwrite them before you're ready. And in general, it just helps you keep track of things. On my batteries, I know that I always start with battery number 1 and then I work my way down the line, so you can know what order you are charging them in and which ones should be fully charged and which ones are dead. All right, secondly, how do you organize your time? How do you make sure that you have enough time to accomplish everything that you have committed to? This one has been a refining process for me over the last 6 weeks, but I really learned to carve out specific parts of my day for specific tasks. So I know I wake up early to work on my freelance work or to work on these videos for my YouTube channel, and I know that time in the evening can either be spent with friends if I have plans, or it can be spent as extra time to work on my freelance work. This has been really important for me because I work full time. I work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and so all of that time is spent in an office separate from here and I can't work on my personal work at all. To be honest, the first couple months of working full-time on top of freelancing was really tough. It was hard to figure out that balance, and I had a couple projects where I missed the deadlines for. I wasn't great with communicating with my clients. That was a learning process for me, and part of what really helped was to actually get a physical space that I could go to just to work on my freelance work. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that if you want to organize your time, you have to start renting an office space, or you need to get a membership at a co-working space. That's not what I'm saying at all, but having a physical space that you know is where you go to work can be really helpful. I actually learned this in college. When I wanted to get a lot of work done, I had specific spots that I would go to in the library where I had trained my brain to know that if I was there to focus and get a ton of work done. So for you, maybe you have a desk in your house that you don't typically use. Maybe you can start using that for the actual work that you want to get done. Maybe that's where you go to work on videos for your brand or just general marketing things, answering emails, that sort of thing. But you do have to be pretty intentional about keeping that space kind of sacred, where you don't get distracted, you don't get sidetracked there. That's where you go to get work done. I think it's pretty easy for most people to keep track of the progress on a single project at a time. You work on one project, you finish it, and you start another one. Managing your time gets a lot harder when you start juggling multiple projects. There were times when I was working on 8 different video projects for 8 different clients, and keeping track of all that can be super intimidating. I am all for digital tools that make our lives better, but I found that managing my time across multiple projects at once, the best way for me to do that was to get something up on the wall. So I like using a whiteboard for this because you can erase it, you can cross things out. You know, if you make a mistake, it's easy to correct that, erase it, and fix it. But if you don't have a whiteboard, maybe you get a poster board or a giant sheet of paper, you get that up on your wall. I found that doing it in a notebook or just on a sheet of paper can be good, but it's a little bit harder to see from a distance, and it's also possible to lose it. And that's a problem. You want to stay organized, and getting something up on the wall helped me do that. So I basically draw a grid on the whiteboard, and then I have all of my projects on a vertical axis. And then on the horizontal axis, I have as many boxes as I need for every single step of each project. That way, at a glance, I can tell which stage each project is in, and I can keep track of each thing. It's also helpful because switching tasks can waste a ton of time in your day. So if you wanted to do the same task for all the projects that you have, you can spend time, just working on the edit of each one. When you finish the edit of one, you move on to the next. And that way you're doing the same tasks, but you're kind of keeping it interesting for yourself because you're working with different projects each time you switch. Or you might want to work on one project start to finish, cross off all those boxes, and move on to the next project from there. And you definitely do get a little bit of that satisfaction of crossing off something on your list. The third and final part that you need to stay organized in is your ideas, especially when we're talking about using video in your marketing. Getting those ideas down on paper or down on an electronic version somewhere so that you get those ideas out of your head and into a physical form that can't forget. Because I don't know about you, but I can definitely be forgetful. Some of my best ideas have been lost because I haven't gotten them down in my phone or I haven't written them down on paper. Now I know for a lot of people, they want their idea log on paper. They want to take a pen and write in a journal and have all their ideas there. For me, I prefer the digital versions. I know that I'm always gonna have my phone with me. It's easy to type out ideas on there, or I use certain apps on my computer when I have my computer with me. And my favorite apps to write down ideas are Trello and Evernote. Getting your ideas out of your head is super important, especially in times when you feel super inspired. Because as much as I wish it wasn't the case, you're not always going to be super inspired. Whether we're talking about video specifically or marketing as a whole, there are gonna be times when you know you need to post something, but you don't feel super inspired. You can't come up with an idea in the moment of what kind of content you should be making. Having a longer-term content strategy can help alleviate some of the stress that you might feel. But even if you have a super solid strategy, that's not a reason to not be writing down the ideas that are coming into your head. That's the brilliant thing about storing your ideas, is you can revisit those next time you need to create a new content calendar. And my other recommendation when it comes to writing down ideas is to write down all your ideas. Even if you feel like some of them aren't fully developed, that's fine. That's just a part of brainstorming. You need to get everything down because you don't know when you might revisit some of those ideas and refine them into ideas that you actually want to use. All right, those were 3 areas that you can start to get organized in today if you're making video content, but maybe you have recommendations in these areas that I didn't touch on. Please leave those in the comments below, or if you have thoughts on how to stay organized in other areas that I didn't touch on, you can leave those down below as well. If you appreciated this video, please hit the like button, and you can subscribe to my channel to see more content like this going forward in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.